Humans do what for fun? Commander Kell's translator device buzzed and clicked, trying to make sense of the bewildering scene in front of him. Around the training field, rows of human cadets marched through mud, rain pelting their faces, with shouts of encouragement and insults flying from instructors clad in dark green uniforms. To Kell's eyes, it looked more like an exercise in madness than military discipline. His blue-skinned aide, Lieutenant Varric, adjusted his gaze, equally perplexed. "Sir," Varric stammered, glancing nervously at the humans, "our report said this was one of their premier militaries. Perhaps this is normal." Kell crossed his arms. "Normal? Look at them. This isn't training, it's torture." The commander, who hailed from the Cash Fleet, a species known for its calm intellect and preference for advanced warfare tactics, had anticipated a tour full of strategic discussions, not a descent into a scene of primal chaos. He began to suspect that their notions of military training were worlds apart. A human officer approached, his uniform soaked, but his face wearing a grin that seemed wholly inappropriate for the grim weather. "Commander Kell," he barked, offering a handshake that Kell cautiously accepted. "Welcome to West Point. I'm Major Harlow, your guide today." Kell nodded stiffly, trying to avoid staring at the strange glint in the human's eyes. "Major Harlow, could you explain what exactly these cadets are enduring?" The Major laughed, a sound that echoed over the training grounds. "Just a little exercise called Field Week. Teaches them teamwork, resilience, and how to function when everything's going wrong." Harlow gestured toward a group of cadets crawling under a net, their uniforms streaked with mud. "See that? That's what we call the mud pit crawl. It builds character." "Builds character," Kell repeated, turning to Varric, whose expression had grown increasingly alarmed. "You call forcing them through filth a character-building exercise?" "Not just any filth," Harlow said, raising a finger as if imparting wisdom. "That's all-natural, high-quality mud. Best kind for training." Kell's mouth hung slightly open as he tried to process the statement. Varric quickly whispered, "Perhaps it's a metaphor, sir. They are speaking figuratively." "I wish it were that simple," Kell muttered, watching as a cadet slipped, face-planting directly into the mud. The human cadet merely got up, wiped his face, and continued the crawl without hesitation. It was as if they thrived in adversity. The Kek trained their soldiers with simulations and controlled environments. Physical discomfort was seen as an unnecessary distraction. Here, the humans seemed to relish it. "Come on," Harlow gestured, leading them further along the track. "This is just the beginning." The trio moved toward an obstacle course of nightmarish proportions. It was a tangle of rope climbs, towering walls, barbed wire, and something that Kell could only describe as a water-filled trench designed specifically to break wills. "What's this for?" Kell asked, dreading the answer. "Ah, this is the Crucible," Harlow announced proudly. "Final test of their training. They go through it sleep-deprived and hungry. If they make it to the end, they've earned their place." Kell blinked, trying to grasp the full horror of it. "You deprive them of food and sleep intentionally?" "Absolutely," Harlow confirmed, showing no signs of discomfort. "It's a lesson in pushing through limits. We break them down here, so the enemy can't do it later." The concept was alien to Kell, literally and figuratively. Kek warriors were trained to maintain peak physical and mental conditions, given ample rest and nutrition to maximize efficiency. The idea of breaking one's own soldiers before they even saw combat was sheer lunacy to him. "If I may," Varric interjected cautiously, "what percentage of your cadets complete this crucible?" "Oh, about 95%, Harlow replied casually. "Some fall out, sure. But that's how you separate those who want to be soldiers from those who are meant to be soldiers." Kell felt his stomach churn. The Kek fleet accepted only those who passed their stringent intellectual assessments, and even then, they didn't subject their candidates to anything this brutal. He turned his gaze to the cadets scrambling over a wooden wall, their faces grimacing in effort, yet eyes shining with an odd mixture of focus. And was that joy? Harlow led them onward, oblivious to Kell's discomfort. "Next, I'll show you the survival training. You're going to love this one." The alien commander doubted that very much. They arrived at a forested area where cadets were clustered around, each holding what appeared to be rudimentary tools. What are they doing? Kel asked, his voice laced with suspicion. Making shelters, Harlow replied nonchalantly. They have to spend the night out here, with just a knife and some rope. Kel took a step back, appalled. You send them into the wild with only a knife? That's right, Harlow said with a satisfied nod. Teaches them to adapt to the environment. The best teacher there is... The best teacher, Kel echoed, struggling to understand. He imagined Kek soldiers lost in a similar environment. They would rely on technology, not crude survival tactics. The Academy's philosophy was becoming increasingly clear and horrifying. Humans embraced adversity not as an obstacle to avoid, but as a tool for forging strength. Harlow pointed to a cadet digging into the ground with his bare hands. See that? He's making a fire pit. Can't survive without warmth. Kel glanced at Varric, who was scribbling notes furiously, his antennae twitching in a sign of deep stress. This wasn't what they had expected. They had heard humans were formidable warriors, but the reason why was now glaringly evident and deeply unsettling. These beings honed themselves in the most extreme conditions and wore their struggle as a badge of honor. It wasn't just their technology or tactics, it was their will to endure the unthinkable. The commander rubbed his temples. How do they endure this? He asked, his voice barely masking his growing concern. Harlow grinned. Simple. They embrace it. You see, Commander, humans don't just survive adversity, we thrive on it. Kel swallowed hard, looking over the cadets once more. They were drenched, cold, hungry, and yet somehow undeniably alive. This tour was far from over, and already Kel felt a creeping sense of dread. If this was how humans trained, what were they capable of in war? The tour continued, much to Commander Kel's growing discomfort. Major Harlow's enthusiasm only seemed to increase as they approached another section of the academy, a large open field ringed with high fences and lined with odd-looking contraptions. The faint echoes of explosions filled the air, sending a shiver down Kel's spine. What exactly is this place? Kel asked, bracing himself for yet another bizarre revelation. This, Commander, is our live-fire training range, Harlow replied proudly. It's where we test their accuracy, composure, and quick decision-making under pressure. Kel glanced around, noticing the expressions on the human cadets' faces. They showed no signs of fear, only a grim focus as they handled their weapons with precision. In the Kek fleet, live-fire exercises were reserved for the elite, executed with controlled parameters to ensure maximum safety. Here, the humans seemed to throw caution to the wind. It was another reminder of how differently these Deathworlders approached warfare. Observe, Harlow said, gesturing toward a line of cadets. Each was equipped with a bulky device strapped to their backs, with tubes and wiring feeding into what looked like a projectile weapon. The cadets took their positions, and at the sound of a whistle, they dashed forward, weaving between obstacles as they fired at moving targets. Those are our tactical drills, Harlow explained. The cadets have to hit all targets accurately while avoiding simulated enemy fire. Keeps them on their toes. Kel watched in horrified fascination as the cadets moved fluidly, their movements seemingly reckless, yet somehow orchestrated. When one stumbled or missed a target, an instructor would immediately bark orders, forcing the cadet to repeat the exercise. There was no room for error. They are harsh with their own kind, Varric whispered, his antennae twitching uncontrollably. Failure seems to be met with no mercy. Kel nodded, his eyes fixed on the scene. And yet, they keep pushing forward. There is no hesitance, no second-guessing. Kel muttered. They act as if the danger is part of the routine. As they walked further along the range, a sudden boom erupted from nearby, accompanied by a plume of smoke. Kel instinctively ducked, covering his head with his arms, while Varric scrambled to maintain his balance. The Kek commander spun around, eyes wide with alarm. A group of cadets had gathered around a pit where they were deploying what appeared to be explosive devices. Easy there, Commander, Harlow said, clearly amused. Just a little grenade practice. Kel straightened up, feeling his heart's race. Grenades? You give these younglings explosive devices to train with. Of course, Harlow replied. If they don't learn how to handle them properly here, how can we expect them to use them effectively in the field? The logic made a twisted sort of sense, but it was far beyond what Kel could accept. In Keck military training, handling explosives was a task left to specialized units, taught through simulations in controlled environments. Yet here, human cadets were tossing live grenades into trenches as if it were a casual exercise. Why take such risks? Kel asked, his voice strained. Surely there are safer methods. Harlow gave him a sidelong glance, his expression turning unexpectedly serious. There's nothing safe about war, Commander. The sooner they learn that, the better. It's not about avoiding danger, it's about mastering it. The words hung heavily in the air, leaving Kel to ponder the sheer audacity of the human approach. For the Keck, war was a matter of strategy, technology, and maintaining a safe distance from chaos. For the humans, war seemed to be something that thrived in the chaos, something they sought to master through sheer grit and first-hand experience. They continued onward, passing a series of bunkers where the cadets practiced close-quarter combat. Kel watched in stunned silence as they engaged in hand-to-hand drills, sparring with an intensity that made his stomach turn. This was not simulation. This was raw, visceral combat fought with fists, knees, and elbows. He noted how the instructors would step in only when a cadet was on the verge of collapse, just to ensure they would stand back up and keep fighting. You call this training? Kel blurted, unable to contain himself. These cadets are at each other's throats. Precisely, Harlow replied coolly. Because the enemy will be two. If they can't handle a fellow cadet, they won't stand a chance out there. Kel struggled to find a response. Varric, standing beside him, was scribbling notes furiously, his hand shaking with a mix of fear and bewilderment. The commander took a deep breath, trying to steady himself as they moved to the final part of the tour. Harlow brought them to a large building with reinforced doors. Now, I've saved the best for last, he said, opening the door to reveal a dimly lit room filled with strange pods lined against the walls. Cadets were strapping themselves into these pods, their faces set with a determination that unsettled Kel. What is this place? Kel asked cautiously. Harlow walked over to one of the pods and tapped it. Virtual combat training. This is where we put them through the ringer without actually sending them to the front lines. Kel exhaled slightly in relief. Finally, something that aligned more closely with Keck military philosophy. Virtual simulations were a key part of their training as well. However, as he watched the pods light up and heard the distant sounds of battle through the walls, he realized there was a difference. The cadets were not calmly analyzing scenarios or running strategic exercises. They were screaming, yelling orders to each other, fighting as though their lives depended on it. They experience every aspect of the battle, Harlow explained, noticing Kel's puzzled look. Pain, exhaustion, fear. We make it as real as possible. Kel felt his knees weaken. Even their simulations were designed to push the cadets to the edge of sanity. There was no escape, no comfort zone in which to retreat. The humans lived and breathed the harsh realities of war, embedding them deep into their psyche long before they ever faced a real enemy. Harlow turned to Kel with a curious glint in his eye. It's something, isn't it? Most people can't quite grasp what it means to be a soldier here until they see it for themselves. Kel swallowed, glancing once more at the cadets in the pods. He could hardly believe what he had witnessed so far, and this was only the training. What did that say about the humans who emerged from it, forged into warriors by this crucible of brutality? Kel began, his voice faltering. I think I am beginning to understand, Major. But I do not know if I can accept it. Well, Commander, Harlow replied with a small, knowing smile, you've only seen part of the picture. Kel's stomach dropped. Only part? There's more? The thought sent a chill down his spine as he realized this tour was far from over. Commander Kel felt a heaviness in his chest as he followed Major Harlow deeper into the labyrinth of the academy. He was already overwhelmed by what he had seen, but the thought of more left him feeling apprehensive. Yet some part of him, fueled by equal parts curiosity and dread, urged him forward. "This way, Commander," Harlow called, gesturing toward an unassuming building at the edge of the grounds. Kel couldn't guess what lay inside, but he braced himself for whatever horrors the humans had concocted next. Stepping through the entrance, they found themselves in a narrow corridor lined with thick doors. Harlow led them to one and opened it, revealing a Spartan room containing a single chair and an array of monitors. A young cadet stood at attention inside, his posture rigid despite the obvious exhaustion etched on his face. "Welcome to the stress testing chamber," Harlow said with a grin. "This is where we push the cadets to their mental limits." Kel felt a surge of unease. "Mental limits? Explain." Harlow turned to the cadet, giving him a nod. "Cadet, commence level 6 scenario." The cadet sat down, strapping himself into the chair as the room lights dimmed. The monitors flickered to life, displaying a chaotic battlefield scene. Kel watched in stunned silence as the cadet began to relay orders, his eyes darting across the screens. It quickly became apparent that the scenario was designed to overwhelm him. Enemy forces appeared from all sides, unexpected obstacles arose, and every decision had consequences. "This exercise bombards them with multiple crises at once," Harlow explained, his voice tinged with pride. "We overload their senses to see how they manage chaos, exhaustion, and pressure. It's about forcing them to make the hard calls, to think when every instinct screams, to panic." Kel glanced at the cadet's face, noting the beads of sweat forming on his brow as he barked orders at the screens. His hands moved frantically, attempting to coordinate the simulated battle as alarms blared and virtual explosions lit up the monitors. "Level 6 is tough," Harlow continued. "Most cadets struggle through it, but if they can keep a clear head here, they'll be better prepared for real combat." The scene on the screens grew, increasingly frantic. The cadet was surrounded, his simulated forces in disarray, but he pushed through, issuing commands with fierce determination. Kel found himself holding his breath, not out of admiration, but fear. The Keck commander had never seen training like this, an exercise so grueling that it seemed to break down the very limits of the mind. Finally, the scenario ended with the cadet slumping back in the chair, his chest heaving as he tried to catch his breath. Harlow walked over, clapping the young man on the shoulder. "Good job, cadet. You held out longer this time." The cadet managed a weak nod before Harlow gestured for Kel and Varric to step back into the hallway. As the door closed behind them, Kel felt an unsettling knot tighten in his stomach. "Why?" he asked, struggling to keep his voice steady. "Why do you do this to them?" Harlow turned to face Kel, his expression uncharacteristically sober. "Because war doesn't wait for them to be ready. It strikes at their weakest moments, their most vulnerable times. We do this so that when they're out there facing the real enemy, they won't break." Kel wanted to argue, to refute this brutal philosophy, but something in Harlow's eyes stopped him. There was a stark truth there, a harsh reality that Kel was reluctant to accept. The humans didn't train their warriors to avoid hardship. They trained them to endure and master it. The realization struck him like a blow. Harlow led them back outside, where they could hear the distant shouts of cadets from the training grounds. The rain had started again, a cold, relentless drizzle that soaked through Kel's uniform. Yet as he looked around, he saw the cadets continuing their exercises, seemingly unbothered by the weather. They moved with an intensity that was both frightening and awe-inspiring. "You see, Commander," Harlow said, his voice cutting through Kel's thoughts, "this academy isn't just about teaching them to fight. It's about teaching them to adapt, to endure. We strip away their comforts, push them to their breaking points, so they find out what they're really capable of. And that's what makes us dangerous." Kel felt a chill run down his spine, and it had nothing to do with the rain. He finally understood the core of human warfare. It wasn't their weapons, strategies, or technology that made them formidable. It was this relentless drive, this refusal to surrender to adversity. They trained their minds and bodies to embrace the chaos of war, turning hardship into their greatest weapon. Harlow nodded, almost as if he could read Kel's thoughts. You came here to learn about our military commander. And now you know, we don't just prepare our soldiers to face the enemy. We prepare them to face everything, every fear, every pain, every obstacle. And that's why, when the time comes, our enemies always hesitate. Kel swallowed hard, his gaze drifting over the academy grounds. It wasn't just a training facility. It was a crucible, a forge that molded young men into warriors of iron will. For the first time, he felt a flicker of genuine fear. The Kek fleet was powerful, their strength and strategy impeccable, but they had nothing like this. He turned to Varric, who was staring wide-eyed, his antennae trembling. We have seen enough, Kel said quietly. Prepare our departure. Varric nodded, hurriedly tapping commands into his device. Kel turned back to Harlow, meeting his gaze one last time. You have shown us much today, Major, he admitted, his voice carrying a grudging respect. I see now why humans are feared on the battlefield. Harlow smiled, though there was no triumph in it. Fear is not our goal, Commander. It's just a byproduct of what we are willing to do to ensure victory. With that, Kel gave a curt nod, turning away and heading toward the shuttle bay. As they boarded their craft, he cast one last glance at the academy, its towering walls and endless training grounds shrouded in the midst of the rain. The image would stay with him, a chilling reminder of what he had witnessed. As the shuttle lifted off, Kel knew that the Kek High Council would not take his report lightly. They had underestimated these Deathworlders, these humans who train not just to survive but to dominate. And the world would soon understand the full weight of that mistake.